Okay, so today we will go with our discussion for Python list. So what are Python list? So what is a list? A list is a sequential collection of values. So meaning it is a sequence. It is a data structure. So lists are in data structures already. Then each value has a location. So the location is called as index. Then indexes range from 0 to n minus 1, where n is the length of the list, then minus 1. Lists are heterogeneous. What do you mean with heterogeneous? Heterogeneous. Values can be of any type. Strings are homogeneous because their elements are characters. Next slide is list syntax. So what is the list syntax? Values are enclosed in brackets. So my list equals 3. This is the example. We have the string or the integer, the characters, and the string. One list can contain another. So we have the empty list example here. So it only consists of brackets without any data inside the brackets. Then any type of data can be in the list. Then you usually refer to a list by elements. That is with the brackets. You can refer to a list by its name as one whole thing when passing it as an argument to a function. So in our past discussions, we differentiate the list, the tuples, and the dictionary. So I think the tuples is in parentheses and the list is in brackets. So list semantics. Lists are mutable. That is, elements can be changed. So unlike tuples, lists are mutable, which means it can be changed or it can have updated index. Individual elements can be changed the same way any variable can be changed with an assignment statement. So with the assignment statement, any variable can be updated or modified. So for example, we have the my list 1, the integer 1, the integer 9, the character A, the integer 4, and the integer 7. Then we declare m as equal to 3, then my list equals m 99. So we have the my list m plus 1 equals to 88. So length function. So the same as with the string type, len or lst will return an integer. Once we get the len function, it will return as an integer because it gets the length of the list. So the number of elements in the list from 0 up to some max integer value. So for example is, if a list contains a sublist, it counts as one element. So for example, this is called as the sublist. So it is considered as 1. So we have the 1, 2, 3. It has the 3 elements. You can call it as part of another statement. For example, print then len my list. So this one is you will print the my list, then you get the length, then you display it using the print function. So accessing elements of a list. So the index starts at 0, just like with a string, and goes up to n minus 1 if there are n elements in the list. So they also can use negative subscript, like negative 1 is the last element on the right, negative n on the left end. So if we have the positive, we also have the negative subscripts. Simple ways to create a list. So we have the hard code, the values my list. This one, example. Then using the replication operator, we have this one, gives a list with 100 zeros. Then you can also use the split method on a string to check for their per characters. Then use the readlines method on a file, so we can use readlines on a file that we are accessing. So put list brackets around a variable. If my num is 5, then my num is the list 5. Okay, so the list is having the variable my num inside it. So this is what we call as list 5 because we declare my num as 5. So the difference between append versus concatenate. So both can be used to add an existing list, but their syntax is not the same. So they have the same purpose, but they have different syntax. So the concatenate operator, this is the symbol for concatenate, plus sign or addition sign, uses two lists and creates a bigger one. So once we concatenate two lists, it will make the bigger list. So you cannot say my list equals my list plus Joe. It must be my list equals my list plus Joe. So this is the example for our concatenation operator. Next is we have the append. It is a method which adds an element to the right end of a list, any type of data. For example, if we have to add my list that append as 3, makes my list one element longer. So this one is we append it to our list, and once we append it to our list, it will add to our elements. It will add plus 1. Okay? Then list accumulation. So either concatenation or append can be used with lists as accumulators. Initialize the list variable as an empty list. So we need to initialize the variable list into an empty list. So we use it by having this one. We can create an empty list with these brackets alone. We have the opening brackets and the closing brackets. Inside your loop, either concatenate or append the new item onto your list variable. So you can concatenate or append with the loop. We have the loop, for loop, while loop, and the do while loop. How to output a list? So we have the very simplest way. Just print the name of the list, then print my list. So this will output the list. So this results in output that has open and close bracket around it, quotes around strings, and commas between items. More often, the output needs each item without the formatting around it. So you don't need to format our output. So in this case, you need a loop that will process through the list one element at a time. Okay. Then C, traversing list. So you need either a for loop that represents elements one at a time, or a loop that provides the subscript for each element one at a time. So we need to use the loop for presenting every elements. Next, we have the list methods. So what are the list methods? We have the list that append. So this is our variable x. Add x to the right end of a list changes original list. So list, once we append, we add it on the right side, right end. List that sort. So this list methods will sort items of list in place. Items must be comparable. So list that reverse. So this will reverse order of items in list in place, either by ascending order, descending order. So that will be our reverse. Then we also have the list that index, returns integer index of first leftmost occurrence of x. So once we find the index of this value, so it will return the index value. Then list that count, this will return the integer count of number of occurrence of x in the list. So this will count all the data in the list. So we have the 5 methods, common methods. Then notes about methods. These methods append, sort, reverse, all change the original list, because as what we said a while ago, list is mutable, which means it can be changed or modified. So if you need to return the original list as well as keep the resulting list, use sorted list name and list reverse list name. So you just need to display the unsorted elements, then you will call the methods, so that you can see the difference between the methods being called. So just as with strings, index will cause an exception and program crash if each search fails. So you need to have the exception, so that whenever your program will fail, especially when searching, so the exception error will be displayed. Next, we have also so we call the list methods above, then we also have the list functions here. So min list returns the smallest element in the list, item must be comparable. So once we have the list and we called it in minimum function, it will return the smallest element or the smallest value. We have the max list, returns the largest element in the list. It must be comparable. So this will, once we have the max, so automatically max will return the biggest or largest element. Some list returns the arithmetic total of all items in list. Items must be numeric. So inside the list, when we use the function sum, it will add all the data inside it. Then we have the sorted list, return a new copy of list in ascending order. Items must be comparable. So once we sorted the list, so it will return the elements in ascending order. Then once we have the reverse, returns an iterator of the list in reverse order. Use a list typecast to get the list. So we have, when we sort, it will be in ascending order, and when we reverse, it will be in descending order. Next slide is notes about functions and methods. When the previous two tables say items must be comparable, it means that they must all be of numeric type. So so for example, we have this items must be comparable. So this will be, so we will have the data that is all integers in value. Okay, it means that they must all be of numeric type. Meaning of numeric type is integer, or they must all be strings. So if we have so you cannot compare strings and integers or numbers. So when we say comparable, so it means that this list is all integers, this list is all strings. Mixing them will cause an exception and error. So we can mix the list with strings and numbers if we are going to compare them. So when they say in place, it means that it will change the original list. So in place, this one you can see, okay, we have the in place, we don't have it. I think we have it in our list methods. Then for the sum function, items can be integer or float. For once we call the sum function, this one, so items can be integer or whole number, and float for numbers with decimal. Okay, this one. So next slide, we have the random versus sequential. Lists have two ways to be accessed. We have the random or direct. Then we have the sequential. Both are useful in their place. So if you need to access all elements of a list either in order or order doesn't matter, sequential is the way to go because it is same player. So once you want to access the elements inside the list, even in order or not in order, so you can use sequential because it is the most used for same player way. Otherwise, you need to access element randomly. Examples of sequential is this: for loop, for I in range 5, then you need to print my list. So you just need to put it as 1, 0, 1 to, I think 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Then for random, this is the example for I in this one. So instead of range, you put the random numbers, then you print my list. So you will, this one is, we will have the 5 elements 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one will display this 3, 2, 0, 4, 1. So the range are in sequential form and this range is in random form, which means we have the random numbers. Then note that it is the order of elements accessed that makes it sequential or random. Both will use the, so even if we call the range this one as sequential, it will just function the same with this random, but in sequence. So sequential, sequence, then random is randomized. Okay. Lists as arguments to functions. Just like other data types, lists can be sent to functions as arguments. So our list can be used as our parameters so that it can be used in a function. So the function must be aware of the fact that a parameter is a list. So once we call a function, we can have a list inside it as our parameter. So it can treat it as a list, use subscripts. Lists are passed to a functions in a different way than other arguments you have seen so far. So when we pass the elements in a function, we can have the passed by value. So the process you have seen so far is that the values of arguments are copied into the spaces reserved for parameters. The functions can do anything you want with the copies. The copies are deleted when the function finishes and returns. This is called the passing arguments by value. So we pass it using the values. Passing by reference, so lists are handled differently. Their address is sent to the functions in the place of the parameter. So when we pass by reference, their address is being sent. So using the address, also called the reference, the function can change the elements of the list. In other words, the function is changing the original contents of the original list. So when we pass it by reference, it will update the original list. Then, in other words, the list contents can be changed permanently. Then Python versus other language. So in languages like C, C++, and Java, passing by reference is fairly common. So we use the passing by reference mostly in this programming language, this tree. So a main reason for this is that those languages can return no more than one value via a return statement. So once we use passing by reference in this programming language, it will just return one value. So if a function needs to return two things, it must use pass by reference to get one of the things back to the calling code. Then next is Python, on the other hand, can return many different values through the return statement. So in Python, you can return many statements even if you are passing it via reference. Then typically functions do not need to pass things by reference because of this fact. So the main thing to be aware of it that a function can change a list which will affect the calling function's variable. Most Python programmers will consider doing this by a mistake by the programmer. If you do use passing by reference, document it well in the header so that anyone using the function knows that a list argument can be changed. So you need to comment your code if you are using passing by the reference. So next slide is sorting. So what is sorting? Sorting is very common activity for computers. Not just in business, sorting is used in database, graphics, simulation, games, and etc. So for example, if you are in database, so you will go with sorting from 1 to n. Meaning is n is for the end of count. For every, like if you have users, we have the n count for users list. Then games, for example, if you have events, so this will sort from the new event to old event. So many different algorithms for sorting. We have the different ones are better for sorting data in different formats, environments, and conditions. Python has a short algorithm built in for lists. So in Python, we have already the built-in algorithm for our list. So why we learn a sort algorithm? So these are the reasons. Good exercise for manipulating list. So once we know the sorting algorithm, either we use any of the programming language, we can manipulate the list. Then not all languages have one built-in. So Python has one built-in. So it differentiates from the other language because they don't have any built-in algorithm. Then why selection sort? One of the simpler algorithms. Easy is to debug if necessary. So when we select, we get the data sorted. So selection sort for n elements into ascending. So when we sort, it will always be in ascending order. For n minus 1 passes, find the largest value in unsorted part of list, swap it with the value of the n of the unsorted part. So this is our algorithms. So there are variations based on using smallest instead of largest, on descending instead of ascending. So list in Python, we have the two-dimensional arrays. So for two-dimensional arrays, you will sometimes have data which has two-dimensional structure, days and hours, for example, or rows and columns. So you could store the data in one big list and keep track of the structure some other way, but most modern languages provide a way to express the two dimensions directly. So list of lists. In Python, you can think of the structure as a list of lists. If we have the math, 1, 2, 3, 4. So of course, in Python, any of these lists can be any size. They don't all have to be 3 elements long. So you can have the any size of the list. Typically, a 2D array is thought of as having so many rows and so many columns, agreed like Excel. So 2D array is example is in Excel. So you see the rows and column. So accessing elements of a 2D array or two-dimensional array, you use to subscript each in a pair of open and close bracket. Ma2 1 is the element in the third row and second column. This one. So since we start with 2, so it will have the third element. Then also we have the 2 element. Just like one the arrays, they start numbering at 0, 0. Okay. So maybe that's all for our Python list discussion. So thank you and please subscribe to my channel. And our next discussion will be, okay, so we have the Python list. I think we will go with Python tuples or Python sets, then Python dictionaries, then we will already proceed to our Python if else statement. So after our Python if else statement, we'll go with while loops, for loops, and do while. Then we have the functions, Python functions, lambda, Python arrays, and Python classes objects. So we will go deeper with our Python topics.